Would you tell us your name and where you were born, and tell us a little about your childhood?
My name is Julius Gutter. I was born in Porubka in Czechoslovakia, 1913. And I lived there till 1922. And then I went to public school in Cheder in Humana. That is a city about 80 or maybe 100 kilometers from my hometown. And I stayed there for 6 months in school, and then I came back home for the holidays. It was twice a year for Pesach, and the second time I came home for the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And then I went back for about 6 years. And when after I was Bar Mitzvah, I entered to a yeshiva. Was in Topolchan. And I was there till I was about 17 years old. And from there, I came home. I stayed home for a few months, and I moved on to a city of Košice, Kaša. That's right by the Hungarian border. And was too young to do lots of things, but I met a fella, and I asked him if there is anything he could help me to get into something, and which I told him I want to stay in the city in Kašo, and I didn't have nobody there, no relatives.
What brought you there?
Just I just took a chance to go there. Nothing particular. I mean, there's I didn't I had enough money on me at that time to buy a ticket on the train to go to that city. See, things was a little bit limited over there. Financially, you know, people were poor. And especially young fellas, when they want to do something for themselves, they just go they look around and go someplace, and they like this place where they come in, and you try to get into something, and you remain there. So when I met that fella, he was not non-Jewish, and by profession he owned a drugstore. In Europe they call it apotheke, and he had a flour mill about 30 miles from the city, and he told me he'll give me a letter of to go down to that village, you know, where the flour mill was, and they'll find a place for me over there. So, but I didn't want to stay there either, so I told them I want to do something else. You know, I'd rather stay in the city where I come here from, in Kašo, and I'll try to be a salesman. So, being so young and not knowing anything but the outside world, so I took a chance, and I told them I'll try, and I'll see if I can do that, if I'd be able to sell anything. So, but not knowing the flour, for one, there are different coloring in flowers. White and whiter, dark and darker. It goes by numbers. So, but sometimes necessities or the way of life, you learn fast. And in about 3 or 4 days, I came almost a professional of it. And I started out to go from store to store, from bakery to bakery, and whoever is using flours, I tried to sell them, which I was pretty successful in the first month, and the following months I was doing better yet, and so on. In about 6 months' time, I would build up a pretty good clientele from different bakeries, Jewish and non-Jewish, and I got to know some of the people who own the bakeries, which I bought one in about 6 or 7 months after I started.
So you were 18?
I was 18, but you see, in Europe, to operate any kind of business, you have to have a permit, and you cannot get a permit till you're 21. So couldn't lie about your age, because you have to have your birth certificate. So there was a man had a bakery in Kashu a few years before, but he got sick and he gave up the bakery and moved to another city, but he kept his license. So when I find it out, I took a trip to that city where the man lived, and I asked him if I could operate on his license, and I would pay him. And he was an older man, and he listened to me the way I talked to him, and he said, "What can I lose?" I said, "Well, you can't lose nothing, but you have a chance to make a few extra dollars." And I also promised him to, I will provide him with all the bread and challahs, for the days and weeks and the months, And so finally we made a deal. He accepted, and I came back. I opened up the shop, the bakery, and hired some people to do the work. Some of the people were former workers of that bakery, and so my name was Iberhyped. That was the name of the fellow's license. So everybody knew me by that name till I was about 22 years old. I was 21. So when I reached my age, I applied for the license, which I got, and I was operating under my own name.
Did you have any prior experience as a bakery, in a bakery or running a bakery?
Well, no, but I had some ideas. I know how that. Before I started, selling the flour, I mean, and being in and out from different bakery shops, I didn't know much. I used to watch my mother at home bake bread and bake challahs for Shabbos, But outside that, I didn't know much.
What was the family business when you were growing up?
Well, they were farmers. They were farmers. And then I brought down a brother, to be with me, and I brought down a sister to keep house. We had a regular family, and then I had two cousins. And they were young boys, and they wanted to get in that line, so I brought them down, and they were working in the bakery in the shop, and we were doing good.
Maybe it would be a good idea at this point to get an idea about your family. How many children there were who lived in the house and when you were
Well,
growing up?
Now we were 10 children, but some of them, I think there were 2 of them were married, and my older brother left home when in 1923. He came to America in 1924. It took him a whole year to get here. So, but we were 7 children in the house all the time.
Any other relatives?
Well, my grandfather and grandmother. Grandmother passed away in 1925. Grandfather passed away in 1929. My father died in 1915, so my father's father, my grandfather, he took over the reign, of the family, and he was raising the family.
And you farmed as a child? Did you have to help on the farm?
My older brothers did, and some of my sisters. We had some horses, we had cows, we had a bunch of chickens all the times, and goose, and we survived pretty good. We lived not in wealth, but we always had something to eat.
How big was the Jewish community
In that
when you were growing up in the little town?
little town, only two Jews. And they were the same family too. My grandfather and his brother. And they were born there. And their father was born there. But before that, I think great grandfather, they came from Poland.
So as far as practicing your religion, did you meet in another town? Did you not practice it? Or what did you do?
Well, on Saturdays they had there was I think 4 villages. They were going to the same place for the for the services. There was not in one town enough Jewish people to have a minyan. So, but there were surroundings. 4 villages. Between the 4 villages, there was maybe 14 or 15 families, and they were very religious people. All of them, pious Jews, very observant, and
I wondered whether you found much anti-Semitism since you were in such a minority situation.
well, I used to come home, for every year after I left home. I used to come home for the high for Pesach and for the high holidays. Now, up till I would say till 1932, 33, there was, I mean, the people, living in the town, maybe they were anti-Semitic, but they didn't show. You know, my grandfather, he was more like here you call it a bar, liquor place. Now he would have the liquor place, he would have the tobacco place, and if there was meetings to be held, it was held in our house. If they needed money, they would come. He was like a lender. He would charge interest. But the relationship with the non-Jewish people at that time, as I can remember or recalling it, it was very, very, very good. Maybe inciting them, maybe they were different, but if they need to know something or to get some advice, they would come to our grandfather.
And what happened in 1933?
In 1933, not exactly 1933, I would say 1935, a couple of years later, when Hitler was in power already, about 2 years. Now, as small as the town was, but they were getting newspapers, and every time you opened up the newspaper and you start to read it, he was telling how many Jews were arrested and how many Jews were thrown in the rivers and how many Jews were driven away, how many were attacked, how many synagogues were attacked and so forth.
In Germany?
Yeah, in Germany, yeah. And you see, that brought some of them maybe were sympathetic, what was going on, what's happening. But inside, maybe, when they were in their own homes, in their own houses, or they had their sons, or they had their daughters, or their son-in-laws, or their daughter-in-laws, they would say, well, it's good it happened. Look at the Jew over here, we have to go to him for everything. We have to go to him for that, we have to go, for this and that. But I can tell you more about from the city, from Kasher, over there. And what took place in 1936, when they assassinated Adolphus in Austria, at that time, after 72 hours, it's just like a whole turnover upside down. The feelings among the Jewish people, everybody was jittery, everybody was worrying what's going to be next, who is going to be next, and it's so close to our border, close to our places. And as time was going on, the following day, we lost one customer. A week later, we lost a dozen, and so on. And
non-Jewish customers.
Non-Jewish, yeah, non-Jewish. And it was it was frightening.
What made people, Jewish people, feel that they were under some threat?
Well, I would say about 90% of the Jewish people who lived in that city, you know, the synagogue was their meeting place. Now, I would say by 80 to 90% of those Jewish people, you know, were observant, and they went to shul to the morning service, but more so in the evening. Now they would come, like service would start, we'll say, you know, 6 o'clock. They would come there at 5 o'clock. What would they talk? They would talk, you know, about the things is happening. You know, each one they had their own idea. Each one was a philosopher. Every one of them everybody was smart, and they should try to figure out, you know. But the one thing, you know, they came to a conclusion that no good will come out of it. You know, they have to figure out, you know, to get out and get out as fast as you can. And that was the time when I decided, you know, the bakery doesn't, you know, it meant a lot to me at that time, because, you know, there's something I started and something, you know, I did it on my own, and I was doing good and I was happy with it, but it will not save, life.
Before we get into when you leave, I'd like to go back just a little bit. You lived in which portion of Czechoslovakia?
You mean my birthplace?
Wherever you lived.
Well, I lived in Kashur. I lived the biggest part of my life in Kashur.
And where is that?
Well, that's on the southern part of. It's right about 15 kilometers to the Hungarian border. We were by let's see, in American miles, we were about 100 miles from Budapest.
Is that the part that remained Slovakia?
Now?
When when Hitler came in and took the Sudetenland.
That became Hungary.
It became Hungary.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recall the time when Sudetenland was taken over?
Yeah.
Could you tell us how people reacted to that?
Well, I was here already when Sudetenland was taken over, but you see in 1937, the first part. I mean, I left home in March of 1937, but the first of the year, right after, you know, the first of the year of 1937, you know, Hitler said that's all he wants is Sudetenland. You know, that was after the Anschluss of Austria, and now the people of Czechoslovakia at that time, you know, they were ready to fight. If the Allies, you know, England and France, you know, wouldn't back out. But, you know, Czechoslovakia was a small country, but they had a good army. They had the best equipment, you know, for any country, not as big as Germany or as good as Germany, but they could fight. But England and France, they got cold feet. They didn't want to get into a fight. They didn't want to help Czechoslovakia. So what they did, they went to Munich, and they tried to make peace. So what kind of peace did they make? They turned over Sudetenland to Germany, and Delegate of France and Chamberlain of England said, you know, they have peace in their lifetime, which lasted exactly about 6 months. After that, you know, they took over the whole country.
I thought I had read that Hitler was talking about giving out propaganda back a few years before that, about Sudetenland and that it was German-speaking people and
Yeah.
and it should go back and
Yeah.
well, that I wondered how your family was reacting to that and how your friends were reacting to that.
Well, the people of Czechoslovakia. I mean, you know, from the time Hitler came to power, when, like in 1934 he took over. He marched into to France. He took we call it. The industrial section, the Ruhrland. That was in 1934. He was only in power 1 year. In that, the people in Czechoslovakia, I mean, the one I came in contact with them, they were also, furious about that France didn't do something about it. France was powerful enough at that time to push him back. That's all they had to do is just show up 10, 15,000 or 20,000 of their soldiers and tell Hitler, go back. If not, but they didn't do it. And that what gave Hitler the insensitive and the, if I can get so easy one place, why not try the other? That's what happened after that. Happened to Austria, and after Austria, what happened to the Sudetenland? Now the people in Czechoslovakia, they were ready to fight, but they just they were sold out by the Western democracy, by France and England.
And as you say, at that point you were already in the United
Yeah.
States. By what route did you get to the United States?
Well, I had, see, in 1936 I wrote a letter. I had some family over here. Had a brother living in Detroit. I had an uncle living here in Columbus, Joe Gutter. I don't know if you heard of him. And I had a cousin, Sam Melton. I don't know if you know him. And Sam Melton was in, he had the factory over here, and I wrote a letter to my uncle and to my brother, and I also asked him to convey that to whoever is capable to send me an affidavit, to come to America. So Sam Melton sent me the affidavit, to come to America. So I left Czechoslovakia, went to Germany. I stayed in Germany for 1 day, and the first boat leaving for America, that's the one I went.
From Germany?
From Germany, from Hamburg.
So how long did your trip take?
7 days.
What kind of a trip was it?
It was very nice, very good. It's like I was on the water.
It was not crowded at that time. It was not unpleasant in any way.
No. I came on the UAS Roosevelt. A nice boat, and people were very nice. Although I couldn't understand them, I couldn't speak any English, and but I was treated very nice.
When you spoke about the affidavit, do you mean he offered you a job here?
Yeah, that I will not fall on the United States government. That I'm not going to be a burden, where somebody would have to support me. And if I don't, if I would need some assistance, then they would help me.
Where did you land?
In
Where did you dock?
In New York.
What was your feeling when you did that?
It was wonderful. It was like a newborn person.
Did anyone meet you?
Not in New York, but they met me over here when I arrived to Columbus. at the Union Station. My uncle, my brother, came in from in Sam Melton. In Sam Melton. They met me at the station.
Were there many other Jews on the boat that you're aware of who were also leaving it for the same reason?
Yeah, there were some from Hungary, and there were some of them from Poland. There were I would say maybe about 60, 70 Jewish people, maybe more than that. But I mean, you see on Shabbos you could, we had services, so you could, and the room we had on the boat, was a nice hall, and was almost full. We had services on the boat.
You got to Staten Island, you got to Ellis Island. What was the procedure there? What did you have to go through?
Well, I had to, they had my passport. When I got on the boat, you see, they took away from, see, they had the passport, and they had all the papers. Now, when I got to Staten Island, and they gave me 25. There was $25 waiting for me there on the boat.
Who supplied that?
Well, Sam Melton.
Ah, okay.
He, so I would have some money, mine arrival. So they gave me all the papers, but my passport. They gave me that, and they gave me the immigration paper, the entry papers, and that's about it. I think so.
And then how long were you in New York before you came to Columbus?
I left New York right away. I had some relatives in New York, but the way I left home, was in a hurry, and because I didn't want to miss to get into Prague, to get the American visa. So I had to meet a certain deadline, and with transportation and way the trains were running at that time, sometimes you could miss the train and wait a long time. So I left addresses and papers at home, and so I couldn't call anybody in New York. See, my mother had 2 brothers in New York, and but I never met them, so I don't know. But I was figuring when I get to New York, I would get in touch with them. But since not knowing who to get in touch with, so I just took the train straight to Columbus.
Did you speak any English at the time?
No, not at all.
How did you manage to be on the train to come to Columbus? How many hours a trip was it?
I think it was around 10 hours.
How did you manage that without speaking to anyone?
Well, there was 2 fellas and 2 ladies. I think one was from Pittsburgh and one was from Chicago, and they spoke a little bit Yiddish. So, and then when they got off, one got off in Pittsburgh, talked to the conductor that I'm going to Columbus, to take care of me till I get to Columbus, which he did. He was very nice.
What kind of work were you coming to here?
What kind of work I was doing? Well, my uncle gave me a job. He was in the restaurant and bar business.
And so you did what?
Uh, well, I was waiting tables. I was keeping the place clean, and I was doing the purchasing.
How did you do this with the language problem?
Well, you learn a few words here and a few words there, and you manage, you get along. In 6 months, he put me as a manager for the whole place. I managed the whole place. And they understood me, the people.
Obviously they did.
Yeah. In fact, after first 2-3 months, they all got to like me, and they were waiting for me to take care of them, to wait on them.
Let's connect you up with your family still in Europe now. There were 6 brothers and sisters left in Europe?
No, it was one brother left in Europe. After, no, there were 2 brothers, but I mean one brother came here in '38, and one brother came here in 1940, but he was in South America for 10 years before he came here.
So in Europe, how many members of the family do you have?
I had 5 sisters and 1 brother and a mother.
And were you able to keep any contact with them?
Yeah, up to, I think, 1941.
What did they tell you when you had your contact with them? What kind of reports were you getting?
Well, they couldn't write too much, but what's going on over there, because the mail was censored. Now, when I wrote to them, I used to write to them by every 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks. Now, some of the letters never got there. Some of them in 1941, came back, and after that, I mean, there was no more mail going or coming. But up to around 1940, we were writing pretty steadily.
And what kind of information could they give you?
Everything, everybody feeling fine. The sister is left home. They went to a different place. They didn't say where, so I figured out right away. That when they said that the sister was left home, that she must be in a concentration camp, or they put her in some labor camp, some labor. And my brother was killed on the way to he was shot on the way to the camp. My mother died on the road to the camp. She was an old woman, sick woman too. So she couldn't make the trip. She collapsed.
How were you able to find this out?
Well, one sister survived. She was in Auschwitz, she was in Dachau, she was in Buchenwald, and after the war, after the liberation, she went back home, and people were living in our house, but neighbors, which they were still friendly to, some of them were glad to see, that one of the households came back, and my sister was waiting, to see maybe somebody else will turn up and come back, but nobody. So some of the neighbors, were telling them, how they got how some of them died. You know, that my brother was shot in the back, you know, on the way to the camp. My mother died on the road. You know, she couldn't make the trip. And the rest of them were, the sisters were done away in the concentration camp with their husbands and all of their children. And there was quite a few of them. You know, they were married, and each one had 5, 6 children. I lost a bunch of uncles, aunts, cousins.
The Allies as a group, all these countries that were part of the alliance, were rather apathetic to the problems of the Jews in Europe. You were here, and some of your family members were here. How did you and your family in the United States feel about this apathy?
Well, now they're saying, you know, if they would know what was happening, you know, they would try to bring them all out. If not all of them, at least as much, you know, as possible. But in 1938, and you know, 1938, they didn't think, you know, I don't think the Jewish people in America actually were interested, or they maybe they didn't know. If they did know, they didn't care so much, because with the Jewish political in this country, you know, they could have done a lot more. You know, like Bernard Baruch, you know, and and you know, he was a big man with President Roosevelt, and the Secretary of the Treasury Morgenthau. He was a big man with the government at that time. You know, and not only them, but I mean the Jewish community, the Jewish people. But I mean, people were not involved. They didn't. It didn't affect. They were not affected. You know, you take the average person. I mean, I don't think there is a family in the United States didn't lose somebody. You know, but they didn't know the people over there. So, I mean, they don't feel about it. They didn't feel it.
At the time, how did you feel about the fact that people didn't do anything?
Well, I had some thoughts about it. You know, I was resentful, but I mean, there's nothing here. What can you do? I mean, lots of times I would think about it, and just.
There was a Czechoslovakian government in exile in England. Was his name Benes?
Benes, yeah. Dr. Edward Benes.
Did you have any knowledge of that at the time?
Yeah. He was a good man. He was. You see, the government of Czechoslovakia is like the previous president, the predecessor, you know, Thomas Garrick Masaryk. You know, he was the best friend the Jews had in Eastern Europe, or even, you know, in Central Europe. And the same thing, you know. Now, as far as the government itself is concerned, you know, the government was not anti-Semitic. You know, some of them, yes, you know, just like you find them in this country. I mean, not every senator or representative in the United States like the Jews.
When you say he was the best friend the Jews had at the time, And what do you mean by that?
Well, he's uh, when you are free, you have freedom of speech and freedom of traveling. I mean, you're not restricted, and if you can do most anything what your ability allows you. If you want to go out and work 5 hours a day, you go ahead and you do it. If you want to work 20 hours, there's nobody going to criticize you or stop you from doing it. And if you want to make money legitimately, you have a chance like anybody else. You're not restricted from moving from one station to another station, or from one city to another city, from one it's a good feeling. And then if you want to go to school, I mean, you can go to a school any place in any school you want to. You're not restricted. You couldn't do that in my time. You couldn't do that in Poland. You couldn't do that in there was at that time Romania was restricted. You couldn't do that in Romania. You couldn't do that in Germany. But when you live in a country like like I lived in Czechoslovakia, you felt you're privileged. I don't say that there was not anti-Semitic. There was. But in the 20s or in the early 30s, I mean, you couldn't feel it so bad till in the mid 30s, till after Hitler came to power. And then it's like a cancer, It starts out small and grows and gets bigger and bigger, and that's what happened to the people in Europe. The only thing is that there was only one class of people and one group of people were chosen for that purpose, to be liquidated. Are the Jewish?
Have you been back to Europe?
Yeah, 3 years ago.
Where did you go?
Well, we were in, my wife and I, we were in Hungary, we were in Romania, and I was in Czechoslovakia. But I tried to go to my hometown, so coming in from Romania from Hungary, from Budapest to Prague, it was a bad day. It was foggy, and the plane was 8 hours late. So we lost 1 day, and we only had 3 days to be in Czechoslovakia. So we couldn't. So we stayed in Prague and couldn't go any further, because I wouldn't have any connection back. But I figured to go again there.
When you went to these 3 countries, what did you want to see? Did you visit people, or did you want to see places?
Well, we wanted to see places, and then we visited. Now we went to different Jewish community. I mean, Jewish installations. Cemeteries and shuls. We were in Budapest. We have seen different Jewish organizations, and we were in Romania. We have seen not much Jewishness going on there, but I mean, because most of them are older people. Younger people are immigrated to Israel, and after they had trouble in Hungary, I think it was in 1960. Most of the young people left Hungary at that time.
Among the people you spoke to there, in any of the countries that you visited, were they able to practice their religion under the communist regime?
Well, there was in '84. No, they had. You see, it was a little bit. It wasn't restricted as much as maybe it was before that. We had kosher food in all the countries. I mean, we ate kosher food in Budapest, and we had kosher food in Romania, in Bucharest, and we had kosher food in Czechoslovakia. And we were taken on tours in those countries to different places, showing from the Holocaust. We were in Theresienstadt, which it's a terrible place.
You want to go back, you say again. Would you go back to the same area?
I would go to what I want to go back to is to see, like Kasho, where I had the business, and also where I went to school, and also to my hometown. I want to see that house once more. It's still there. 'Cause I have some of my family, different towns, were in Europe a couple of years ago, and they said, they visited the town, and the house is still there.
You told us how you felt when you first got to the United States. How did you feel when you returned to Europe?
It's looking up. I mean, going into some of the places, like we were in Budapest, went into to the the main shul in Budapest, which at one time had about 2,200 members, and to see the benches over there, how they're lapidated, and the ark, which is not the same ark in that shul what it was before. When the Germans were there, they used that shul for a warehouse. So most everything what they put was back there is from someplace else. Maybe from different shuls, or what's left of the, what was there before. Now the same thing in Romania. In Czechoslovakia, they call it the Alternaya shoe. I think you heard of it. There's one shoe. Did you heard of it? They call it the old and the new shoe. Alternaya shoe. And there's big history about that shoe. It goes back 600 years. It's supposed to be, according the legend, where a figure is laying on, like in the attic. There was a chief rabbi by the name Bar Lebev. He made that figure to be human, from Sunday till Friday till sundown. And he was a giant, but he was not human.
Go ahead and tell us more about it.
And now he's supposed to be laying in that shul, which is a big tourist attraction. And then we have visited the museum, in Prague, one of the largest Jewish museums in the world. Could see all kind of Jewish and Hebrew mementos, and it was very interesting. It was good to see it. So, but I would like to go. If I go back to Europe, I would like to go. Is on the cemetery where my father, my grandfather is laid. See, my mother is laying someplace on the road. We don't know where.
Do you have children?
Yeah.
How many?
4.
Have they ever been to Europe?
No.
Have you told them your story?
To some of them. I talked to my oldest son. He knows my story, but I didn't talk to the other ones too much about it.
If Hitler had not come to power and had not had the plans he made obvious he had, do you think you would have come to the United States?
No.
So in that sense, you are very much affected by the Holocaust, with the loss of your family and the change in your plans.
Right.
Is there anything you would like to comment on about your whole experience with the Holocaust? Any feelings you have, any observations, anything?
Well, the personal feeling is immaterial now. It's lots of the things was happening over there and going on. Maybe it couldn't be prevented, but if there could be a way where people could be saved, with the power the United States of America had at that time, before the war, and even during the war. If they would open the doors and let the people, some of the people, come in, instead drifting on that big wide ocean, and slam the door on them, they cannot come. Maybe not millions would be saved, but I would say, there would be a good portion of them could be saved. Maybe 500,000, maybe 1 million, but throughout the history, the Jewish people are always scapegoats.
Well, I want to thank you very much for sharing your story with us. It's a very moving story. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad I was